Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're actually wandering into a pretty dark, psychological wasteland. We're going to unpack this really fascinating metaphor from our source material about a figure known as the Pale Inquisitor, the ghost of law who drifts through the mind like a cold gray mist. Let's dive in and see exactly how the architecture of our own mental stasis is constructed. Just listen to the core philosophy of this figure. It is honestly chilling. You will only be safe when you are dead, for only the dead cannot fail. Wow, right? Under this highly necrotic law, vibrant life, chaotic desires, and those messy original impulses, they're all viewed as absolute transgressions. Basically, to be alive is to risk failure, and to be totally motionless, well, that's considered perfect.
Let's get into Section 1, the architect of stasis.
So, the Inquisitor's core function is defined as the architect of the grave, and his absolute masterpiece, absolute stasis. Wherever this figure drifts, he distributes this chilling negative energy, and it has a singular goal: the complete eradication of organic, creative movement. He literally turns the wild life of the mind into a suspended, totally motionless wasteland of duty.
All right, Section 2, garments of crushing gravity.
Now, to enforce this absolute law, this wraith is draped in robes made of iron filings. And these aren't just your everyday garments. They actually pulse with this magnetic hunger for guilt. Beside him hangs the laden banner, which is a literal physical manifestation of his law. It hangs incredibly heavy. It absolutely refuses to flutter in any wayward wind of freedom or creativity. These items right here, they are the ultimate motifs of stagnation. Let's actually break down the sheer weight of this existence. The Inquisitor's armor is etched with the sins of failed ancestors, acting as a kind of penitential garment. Every single spirit and thought that passes through these woods just adds to this crushing gravity. He acts as a literal magnet, attracting only the absolute densest, most stagnant parts of the human spirit. Moving right along to Section 3, the spectral bell's toll. Let's walk through exactly how this Pavlovian trigger works in real time. It's wild. Step 1. An individual's inner self attempts to manifest an original impulse, or, a spontaneous thought. Step 2. The spectral bell tolls. Step 3. This sound serves as a sensory warning that strikes immediate, paralyzing fear right into the soul. And finally, Step 4. Before the actual punishment even begins, that chaotic thought is completely, entirely suppressed. The really crucial takeaway here is that while traditional bells mark the physical passing of a soul, the spectral bell, it marks the psychological death of spontaneous thought. You can directly compare this bell toll to the internal silencing of our creative impulses. It reminds the psyche of its inherent guilt, simply for having an original idea. Let's look at Section 4, the massive ledger. Let's compare two totally different states of being. To the Inquisitor, a vibrant, living soul is nothing but a messy draft, just full of chaotic noise and messy desires. But his ultimate goal, which is written right there in his massive ledger, is to edit that existence down to a single blank page, just a perfect, motionless line of duty. You can kind of think of him as an anti-Galahad. Rather than seeking spiritual fulfillment or some holy grail, he seeks a spiritual vacuum. It's purification by subtraction. By constantly interrupting and silencing internal dialogue, your individuality is subtracted over and over until there is absolutely nothing left but clean nothingness. Which brings us to Section 5, the necrotic superego. Okay, so when we drop the mythic veil here, this all builds into a pretty stark psychological reality. The Pale Inquisitor is actually a metaphor for the necrotic superego, that overactive, hypercritical part of the mind that's just asserting complete dominance over us. And the chaotic noise of the silver wolf, or those wayward souls, that's the id, our primal creative instinct. And the spectral bell, that is our conditioned anxiety and fear, ringing out whenever we dare to step out of line. This whole thing is basically a cautionary tale of a soul completely losing its autonomy. Because the cost of listening to this bell is incredibly steep. This conditioning creates a perpetual state of psychological fear. It silences your internal dialogue, completely erases creative thought, and systematically replaces all our vibrant desires with cold, rigid duty. Finally, Section 6, a monument to fear. So what's actually left behind in the aftermath? Well, the forest of the mind just doesn't recover. It remains a sterile wasteland choked by the iron-thorned briars of this necrotic devotion. It's no longer a place of life. It essentially becomes a permanent monument to the fear of freedom, a space where the absolute law of the Inquisitor just hangs over everything. So I'm going to leave you with this final, kind of piercing question. Are you silencing your own chaotic noise out of a fear of freedom? Is your own necrotic superego, your inner pale Inquisitor, tolling a bell of anxiety that turns your vibrant, messy draft of a life into a single blank page? Definitely something to ponder the next time you step back out into the noise. Until our next explainer, tread carefully in those woods.